Coming up, we uncovered the hiccups and hassles in the newly simplified FAFSA application process. Don't miss out on this crucial update. Plus, Bryan Newland, the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, shares insights into the crucial climate initiatives the Bureau is undertaking. And join Holly Cook Macarro as she shares her once-in-a-lifetime experience at a glamorous White House state dinner. You won't want to miss her exclusive insights into this glittering affair. Those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start today in Washington, D.C., where a longtime member of Congress who is Native American has secured one of the most influential roles on Capitol Hill. Chickasaw citizen and Oklahoma Representative Tom Cole is the new chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. After getting the backing of House Republicans last week, Cole will now lead the group of lawmakers that is responsible for setting aside money for almost all of the functions of the federal government. The 10-term, 74-year-old lawmaker said in a statement that he is excited to hit the ground running. Cole is set to remain the co-chair of the Congressional Native American Caucus and has been described by his colleagues as one of the few Republicans that Democrats say they enjoy working with, according to Politico. We go now to Hawaii, where $700,000 in grant funding will investigate the state's climate using indigenous approaches. Scientists at the University of Hawaii at Manoa will study Hawaii's communities and ecosystems that are particularly vulnerable to extreme weather events like flash floods and wildfires. The National Science Foundation grant will be used to conduct research that uses both scientific and traditional Native Hawaiian knowledge to learn about the climate. We head now to New York City, where an indigenous basketball player has been drafted to the WNBA. Alyssa Peely was drafted in the first round to the Minnesota Lynx as the 8th overall pick, which was higher than what experts were predicting. The Samoan and Inupiaq star became the 7th player to be selected from the University of Utah and just the 3rd overall to be selected in the first round. Peely signed a 4-year deal, paying more than $324,000 total. Speaking to Holly Rowe on representation, she explained a lot of Indigenous and Polynesian girls don't get to see role models, and she feels blessed to be that for them. In the world of entertainment, more Indigenous talent is coming to your screens soon. After the success of the live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the franchise is getting its first movie in 2025. A couple of familiar faces were in the recent cast announcement for voice actors, including Jessica Matten from the TV show Dark Winds and Roman Zaragoza from the series Ghosts. Well, actor Lily Gladstone stars in a new true crime drama called Under the Bridge on Hulu. Gladstone was in Los Angeles on Monday for the show's premiere. While promoting the new series, Gladstone was asked about her whirlwind experience as the Oscar-nominated star in the film Killers of the Flower Moon and what it meant for her Blackfeet Nation.
It'll take a while before the impact of what actually happened hits because you're so in the moment. But I think when it really hit for me was when my nation is a confederacy with 3 bands in Canada, and they all jointly decided to bring me into Women's Headdress Society and honor me, sheerly for the representation that this whole awards run gave to all of these young Blackfeet kids, Blackfoot kids, Indigenous kids everywhere. And I think getting to walk out of that and immediately feel what that impact was in such an overwhelmingly beautiful way, it just, it really I think I'm still going to be kind of piecing together what the what the long-term effects of it are, but to have so much love and positivity and celebration of Indigenous life and joy in the wake of talking about that film, that story, that history, and what it did for everybody, and it was an incredible moment.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs is often thought about as an extension of the federal government and tribal nations. The BIA builds roads and bridges, funds law enforcement, and the agency supports tribes as governments carrying out the trust responsibility. These days, add to that list climate change. ICT's Mark Trahant is here to tell us more. Mark?
Hi, Aaliyah. There's an old saying, show me the budget, and I'll tell you what the priorities are. The Biden administration's proposed budget for next year is packed with funding for climate resilience and climate adaptation projects. I talked with Bryan Newland, the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, about climate and the government's initiatives working with tribes. Here's the first of a two-part interview. Secretary Newland, welcome to the ICT Newscast.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it.
Let's start with a big picture question and just let me ask you about climate change. We just recently took a tour at Quinault, and I know you visited there, so I kind of wanted to get your perceptions of what's happening there and kind of the context for that.
Well, I had the chance to visit Quinault a year ago, and they are doing just amazing work on climate relocation and climate resilience. We provided funding to Quinault almost 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago. It's one of 3 communities that are going to serve as kind of pilot projects, if you will, on community-driven relocation. And they're just doing amazing work. I was really impressed by the foresight in their planning and how they are really thinking through a lot of issues that aren't intuitive and working to address them. And so I've been really impressed. And, we shouldn't be surprised that when tribes have resources, they're able to do very impressive things. And so I look forward to seeing where they're going to take that.
That, to me, was one of the stories that kind of popped up, was that we drove the coast up, and you see all these communities that are going to be facing the exact same situation, but it's tribal communities taking the lead and saying, we got to start planning for this now.
Right. And when you think about it, Mark, this is not only are they taking the lead here in the United States, they are really serving as leaders in this effort for the world. There aren't a lot of places that are really engaged in this sort of activity right now. There are a lot of people who are thinking about it, but what the tribe is doing at Quinault, what they're doing at Napakiak and Newtok in Alaska, is they're really on the leading edge of things that we're going to have to think harder about across the globe. And it's really exciting for me and our team here at the department to be a part of that.
One part of that, thinking this through, is the scale.
Yeah.
And you look at the $25 million that come into from the BIA, but they're talking about a project that is ultimately going to be $400 or $500 million. And you take that in every tribal community, and it's a huge scale.
It is. And on top of that, Mark, there are tribes that are facing impacts from climate change that aren't necessarily going to require them to move entire communities, but they're going to have to spend a lot of money making their communities more resilient, whether it's drought or wildfire or changing ecosystems that change the foods that they eat, or just more severe weather. It's not just relocation, which is expensive enough, but it's also that resilience piece of it. And we're really ramping up our investments there as well. As you know, we just rolled out a $120 million investment at more than 100 locations across the country to help tribes with that resilience piece.
Well, when I saw that release, I was struck because 20 years ago, it was a question of mitigation versus adaptation. And now your budget is saying adaptation now.
Yeah, tribes have have really been at the leading edge of people in this country feeling the impacts of climate change. And of course, tribes have been warning about this for a long time. And so we have it as part of our trust responsibility to protect the ability of tribal people to live together in their homelands. And so we're putting our money where our mouth is. The president is leading this effort, and we're really excited to be a partner with tribes in this innovative work. And we're also really excited in making investments to mitigate climate change overall. So we're doing a yes and approach across the government.
Another tough conversation is strategic minerals. And if you look at what the country needs and what the world needs in terms of strategic minerals, 90% of them go on or near Indian country. How do we have a conversation on one side, and on the other side, how do we get mining companies to really be different this time?
Well, for our part here in the federal government, it starts with meaningful consultation. And I want to emphasize, and underscore, put it in bold and italics, that the consultation has to be meaningful. And so that means that as federal agencies, when we're considering permits or rights of way or things like that, that we have to be proactively engaging with tribes early on in the process. And we're working really hard to do that. The president has issued a government-wide directive to agencies to engage in consultation, but paired that with a memo outlining some of the baseline requirements for consultation. And we always want to enter that process thinking about how do we work to achieve consensus with tribes on any issues we're working on. And so for us, that's where it starts. And again, that's tied to our trust responsibility. And in a lot of places, tribes want to be a part of some of these initiatives, whether it's critical minerals or renewable energy, because this stuff is necessary to deal with climate change, but we can't just be reckless in the way that we go about it. And that's why the consultation piece is so critical.
Secretary Newland, thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Mark. It's really great to talk with you. And thanks for covering these issues and highlighting the incredible work that tribes like Quinault are doing on these issues, and for giving us the opportunity to talk about how we're trying to partner with them and really provide support while making sure that tribes are leading the way.
Mark, that was such an interesting interview. You asked Assistant Secretary Bryan Newland about a shift in funding priorities for climate adaptation, but perhaps we should explain that a little bit more. What is adaptation and what is mitigation?
That's really an important question. I'm glad you focused on that. 20 years ago, almost all of the climate spending was in the category we called mitigation. And that means doing what we can to limit or reduce global warming from fossil fuels. Think about EVs, no coal production, or limiting greenhouse gas emissions. Now, more and more, you're seeing budgets focused on adaptation. That means protecting people from the climate that's changing now. It's building higher seawalls, it's protecting utility lines from wildfires, and it includes moving people, sometimes entire communities, away from harm. When I asked Secretary Newland this question, he said the answer is both. It's not too late to try and limit how humans are changing the climate, but adaptation projects have to occur before people are more at risk.
Mark, thank you so much.
At FEMA, a huge part of our mission is to make sure we are preparing the nation for catastrophic events. As extreme weather continues to become more intense and frequent, disaster preparedness has never been more important. Older adults face even greater risks and challenges when it comes to preparing, especially those who live independently, have low income, have disabilities, or live in rural areas. This May, President Biden announced Older Americans Month, reminding us that older Americans are the pillars of our community, and we owe it to them to value their wisdom, celebrate their contributions, and champion their well-being. This September, I'm excited to announce that National Preparedness Month will have a special focus on the older adult population. Through our Ready campaign, FEMA is evolving the way we engage with communities to be more inclusive and impactful than ever before. Today, I ask you to join us in our efforts by finding ways to help prepare the older adults in your network or community. Stay tuned for new tools and resources, but don't wait. Visit ready.gov to get started. Thank you.
It is FAFSA week at the Department of Education. That is the free application for federal student aid. ICT education reporter Renata Birkenbuhl has more on the rollout of what's being called a simplified application, but hasn't been a smooth rollout.
The rollout has been quite a challenge, and one of the big reasons for that is because of all the glitches that the system rolled out with, but then also not too long ago, all the calculation errors and the wrong tax information being inserted into some of the forms from the IRS due to the new data exchange process that is currently in place. So with that said, schools have not been able to process the information that they would have already received at this point in time, which is known as an ISER. So an ISER record is an International Student Identification Record, which this is the data that the schools need to be able to generate to calculate financial aid and in turn, send them an award offer. So many students at this point in time, have not received a lot of this information like they normally would. The biggest thing is everything has been delayed. Everything has been pushed back. Typically, the FAFSA form is available October of every year, October 1st of every year. When a student goes online and completes the FAFSA form, they select the colleges and universities that they're interested in attending in the fall of that year. Now, those schools that they get accepted to will send them an award letter. Schools cannot generate an award letter until first, number one, they receive that ISER record from the federal student aid. The ISER record has all the data they need to be able to calculate the amount of federal aid they will be able to offer that student. Okay. That would be within the award letter that is sent directly to the student. Okay. So that is, typically that's what would be happening right now at this point in time. Things would be actually rolling, right? We're in April right now. They'd be receiving these letters right now already. I'm anticipating they will not start seeing these letters this year until probably mid-May or even possibly late May.
Reyes said applications for financial aid are down 27% in New Mexico and 40% nationwide. He does believe that once the glitches are fixed, it will be a good system.
With the new FAFSA simplification, there's a lot of new things that are coming forward that we're supposed to be working that are not, but they will eventually. We will get there eventually, and we want to stay positive. But one of the big things, of course, is the new formula. They have a new formula, which is actually going to expand more federal aid to more students. So that's a positive thing. More students are going to be able to get more federal aid. The other thing is the streamlined process. The FAFSA form typically had over 100 questions. Now with this new form, it could be as few as 18, but typically it's probably going to be about 40 or so. The other thing that the new FAFSA simplification does, it expands the flexibility that financial aid professionals have in awarding aid, and that's awesome. Giving them some more flexibility is a good thing to working with our students and families. And then also for the homeless determination, it's supposed to make that just a little bit easier as well for students that are homeless.
Every state offers assistance to students and parents. A good place to start is high schools or the state's Department of Education. Reyes said New Mexico resident students are able to get free tuition to state schools. Renata Birkenbuhl, ICT News.
Arave tuat tavai, which is Ute for today is a good day. Arave is today, tuat is good, and tavai is day. Arave tuat tavai, which is Ute for today is a good day.
A state dinner is described as one of the grandest and most glamorous of affairs. It is held when a head of government visits the White House. That was the case last week when President Joe Biden hosted the Japanese Prime Minister. Among those invited were ICT regular contributor Holly Cook Macarro and her husband Mark, who is the president of the National Congress of American Indians. Holly, we're so happy that you're here with us. How do you even begin to describe the pomp and circumstance of this state dinner?
Well, it was surreal for a number of reasons. One, being invited to a state dinner, it's one of the most prestigious invites in Washington, D.C. And Mark and I were further honored with a seat at the head table, which was a surprise to us. So in addition to the number of attendees there who were just extraordinary leaders in the United States and in the community, and with the Prime Minister and his wife there, it really was an extraordinary evening, and I think I'm still processing it as well.
Tell us about the moment that you first received this invitation. What was your reaction?
Well, I'm actually in Paris today, and I had a trip planned, this trip along with a trip to London, but delayed that when the invitation came in, and it was obviously an invitation that you can't say no to. And to be invited to a state dinner is such a rare and an extraordinary opportunity to represent and to participate and be at the table like we always talk about. So when that invitation came in, we immediately, cleared the calendars and made arrangements to make sure that we were there, and said yes to President and Dr. Biden.
You've been inside the White House many times, but never for a state dinner. What were your first impressions of the evening?
It's extremely, glittery, I would say. The White House, I thought, looked just extraordinarily beautiful. As you know, the state dinner was for the Japanese Prime Minister and his visit to the United States last week. And state dinners are held to cement relationships with our allies and those we have relationships with around the world. And this is the spring cherry blossom season in Washington, D.C., and the White House was decorated with that theme, and it really was beautiful. The Marine Band was playing as one entered the White House, and that famous kind of a traditional walk through the room there was decorated with fans, and from there it was a reception kind of on the first floor of the White House there, and in the library, in the Red Room, and it was really an opportunity to visit with members of Congress, with leaders from around the world. Jeff Bezos was there from Amazon, Tim Cook from Apple, many others who were there in attendance that were in the mix. So it was really extraordinary.
You said earlier, Holly, that you found yourself seated at the head table, and you were actually sitting next to President Bill Clinton. How did you feel about that seating arrangement, and what did you and President Clinton talk about during the dinner?
It was a bit of a full circle moment for me. When I first began my work in Washington, D.C., I was an intern in the Clinton White House, and then a staff assistant in intergovernmental affairs doing Indian affairs under Lynn Cutler, who was his special assistant for Native American issues. And so I had, done work with President Clinton. I had worked with Secretary Clinton on her presidential campaign in a number of capacities. So sitting next to President Clinton, I was happy to see him. It was a terrific visit. We talked about the Native vote, the importance and opportunities there, certainly in both in the last election and that power that lies in that Native vote. He told a story about a tribal leader who was there from South Dakota, and back in the early 90s when Bosnia was an issue for him, and he talked about how that tribal leader made a reference to service in Indian country in the military. We talked about that issue, And we talked about how Indian country has changed since he was in the White House. I always really felt then, and it was reinforced for me again, that President Clinton, he has a deep and abiding interest in Indian affairs and cares deeply about that issue. I encouraged him to continue to be active and engaged.
Holly, in a post on social media, you mentioned that President Joe Biden, who was also sitting near you, gave you a thumbs up during the dinner. What goes through your mind in that moment?
At the dinner, I had Governor Roy Cooper from the state of North Carolina. On my left, I had President Clinton, and then 2 seats down was President Biden. And I glanced down at one point, and he was looking at me, and he gave me, a little like heads out, little thumbs up. And I really did think that, I'm a kid that was born in an Indian hospital on the Red Lake Indian Reservation, and looking out and seeing, the luminaries that were in the audience, and my husband Mark was sitting next to Secretary Clinton and also having a very good visit. I really kind of pinched myself and thought, how did I get here? It was really kind of surreal for me.
Holly, we'll end it there. Thank you so much again for joining us and telling us about this absolutely incredible experience.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.